What's up, HalfStack? Hope you're having a great time so far. My name is Rahat, and you're tuned into my talk, R&B GraphQL, also known as Running and Building GraphQL. I know, I'm amazing at puns. I'm full of them. So, while you're here with me, we're going to go over a couple different technologies. We're going to go over Gatsby, a React framework. We're going to use it to hit a custom API that I've built before. And we're going to use Apollo client along with Gatsby to create an awesome, super dope app. And I'm going to go into the rules of what makes an app super dope in just a little bit. But before we get into that, you might be wondering who the heck I am. Well, like I mentioned before, my name is Rahat. I'm a software developer living in New York City, working here. I'm also a speaker, which is why I'm here talking to you guys today. I'm also a mental health advocate. And I talk a lot about mental health and technology, some of the effects that has on us who work here in the tech space, something that's not really talked about too much, and I'm hoping to change that little by little. I'm also the co-host of a podcast called Tech for Humans. Tech for Humans is all about showcasing the positive impacts that tech can have on humanity. And trust me, tech can have some positive effects on humanity. And you can check out what those positive effects are on our episodes. We have new ones every Thursday. They're all on www.techforhumans.io, as well as on all major podcast platforms. So check them out. Now, as a developer, you may find yourself in this peculiar situation. You have this GitHub profile with a bunch of your commits, a bunch of your awesome code or not so awesome code. And there's just so many different side projects that are unfinished. Maybe some empty repos. And, oh man, some of them have domain names attached to them because you decided to buy that domain name. I think I gotta go and make sure a couple of them aren't renewed. I'll go do that later. Anyway, once in a while, you still might have like this inkling to take one of those to the end, get it out there, ship the thing. And you got to make sure that it's a dope app when you do that. So to help you out, I've got this list called Rahat's Laws of Dope Apps. So what do these need to do? Dope apps need to be fast. The thing is, your users probably don't have a lot of patience. Next thing, it's got to be easy to deploy because I don't have a lot of patience either. And it's got to be mobile ready because a lot of people are accessing the internet on their phones. So you got to make sure you're optimized for the world of mobile. It also needs to be accessible. Now, we're not going into this accessible part during this talk, but I included it here because it's something that's very important. It's something that we don't always take into consideration. Now, through my research, extensive research on Wikipedia, I came to the conclusion that progressive web apps actually fulfill a lot of Rahat's laws for dope apps. See, progressive web apps are web pages. They feel like native apps. They work offline. You can install them on your homepage on your phone. It's an app. And one of the other cool things you can do is deploy it to the Google Play Store. That's amazing. And if Apple ever allows us to do that on their stuff too, then this could be how we develop apps in the future. If that happens, maybe. I don't know. So what goes into building a progressive web app or PWA? What is the recipe? So there's three main things that you've got to take into consideration. It's got to run under HTTPS. It's got to be secure. It needs to have a web app manifest. That is just a super fancy word for a JSON object that has a bunch of data about your site. You also need to implement a service worker for your offline needs. This is what lets your user actually, save the app to their mobile phone and use it even when they don't have internet. Now, you might be thinking, okay, Rahat, I don't want to have to configure and do all this if it's a side project. What if it doesn't go anywhere? It's fine. I've come up with this stack. Well, I haven't really come up with it. I've learned it from a bunch of other people that could probably help you with getting this out the door. We're leveraging React, specifically Gatsby.js, which I mentioned before is a React framework. We're using Apollo with it because we've got a backend that's a GraphQL API. We want to make sure we're hitting that API for actual dynamic content. You can use your favorite CSS framework. I'm just using straight CSS on this one, but use whatever you want. I have no opinions there. And the backend too. You can use pretty much whatever you want. This especially works really great with like serverless solutions and things like that. I've just got kind of a basic Node, Express, MongoDB, GraphQL API that just does like two things. And we'll go into that in a second. So let's get into the running and building GraphQL part. So Gatsby.js gives you a bunch of stuff for free. You get build-time GraphQL for free. You can drop in a couple plugins and it just makes it a PWA for you. And it serves fast static pages to all of your users. Now static is great, but we want it to be dynamic. That's kind of how the internet works. So we're going to be leveraging Apollo later on for runtime GraphQL. Now, I put out a whole bunch of jargon, a whole bunch of stuff that you can probably put on your resume for your next job, but what does it all actually do? Let's take a look. So what I've got here is a basic API I've built. It doesn't really do much. What it does really is help me keep track of my favorite 90s R&B songs. So I can create a song. Let's create one right now. Gets added to my database, and then I can go and query for all of the songs. Not a huge, groundbreaking thing, but serves the purpose for what we want to take a look at. So now let's go ahead and take a look at the code real quick. So how do we actually connect our API to our Gatsby project? Well, that's pretty much as easy as installing this plugin right here, Gatsby Source GraphQL. Once you've installed it, doing a simple npmi, you can add these options. These options are pretty much copy and pasted from the Gatsby documentation, and I just replaced the fields with what's relevant for my API. And I made sure that I'm pointing it at the endpoint for the API itself. So what does that do? Well, how does that even help us? Well, if you remember before, I was in this playground querying for all my songs, but now I get this graphical playground. This comes right out of the box, shipped with Gatsby. You don't have to configure anything to get this. But since I configured my endpoint, I can now query straight from Gatsby all the data that I need. And the great thing about this is all of this runs at build time. So when I'm building out my Gatsby site, I now have all of the data that I need right there as static content. So let's take a look at this site real quick. So here's what I built. My R&B tracker. Has all my songs listed out here from my query. I can go and visit all of these links. And all this, again, is done at build time. So this is all static content. It's super fast. I don't have to worry too much about, well, I do have to worry a little bit about people's, internet connections, but this makes it a little bit easier. And I can add new songs too. Now, I know what you're thinking. Hold on, Rahat. You just added some dynamic content. You told us that this is a static site generator. Well, so here's the deal here. At the end of the day, Gatsby is a React framework, meaning anything we do in React, we can do in Gatsby. So let's take a look at two of the components that I built out. First thing is my input. Remember, I'm adding new songs to my list. So how am I actually doing that if this is a static site? I'm not using the static part of it. I'm bringing in use mutation from React Apollo hooks. I get this from Apollo. And with this, I can actually create my songs, right? This is what's actually being run. This is the mutation that's adding all the songs to my database. But that's not the only thing that I have to do. Remember, I kept saying that the query that Gatsby gives you runs at build time. We're not triggering a build here. Hint, hint, later we might be. But what we're doing now is also bringing in use query from React Apollo hooks. And we're using that in conjunction with this use static query that we get from Gatsby. Now, Apollo gives me a couple status things. Whenever the live data is available, I'll know that. Whenever it's loading, I'll know that. If I need to refetch, I can do that too. So in here, what's happening is when the status is loading, so when Apollo is trying to get the dynamic content from my API, it's still going to show you something. it's going to show you all of the static content that Gatsby has already built for you, meaning you already have pretty much everything you need on the site, so start interacting with it and start looking through everything. But at some point later, when that live data is available, I can replace that static data with the actual dynamic content, which is probably the most powerful thing that this combination of technology can do. So let's take a look at this in action. So I've slowed down my internet just a little bit so you can see this a little bit better. And well, my internet's pretty slow anyway, so maybe I didn't have to, but I'm going to refresh. Okay, so you'll see my initial list comes up and then it expanded to a larger list. That was the difference between me going over my static data versus my dynamic data. This is really my favorite thing here because, as you saw, the website already loaded. It was already ready to go, ready for your users to interact with it, start using it, start looking at all of your different songs that they need to listen to at some point, and your website is already functional. And then you still get even more data later on that just pops in and is also ready to go to use at that later point in time. All right, so now let's go through a little bit of a summary of what we just saw and take a look at another consideration that we should probably make. So back to running and building the GraphQL. So the first thing we did was hook up Gatsby to our custom GraphQL API. Remember, all we did was install Gatsby source GraphQL and replace all of these fields with what we needed for our own API. This is all just, again, lifted straight off of the Gatsby documentation. And what did that do for us? Remember, it gave us this graphical interface that lets us test our queries that will be run at build time. This is all of the static data that Gatsby gets for you whenever it's building your site for the first time. But again, like I mentioned before, the internet is dynamic. It is not static. So we're using mutations from Apollo as well as this use query hook from Apollo. And what that's doing for us is making sure that after some point when the user adds more dynamic content to your site, we're still fetching that dynamic data and replacing the static data with it. So here's an incredibly complex diagram that might explain this just a little bit better. So Gatsby at build time is giving us, running some queries, giving us our data, giving us our site, bunch of static pages. It's great static site, pretty performant. Then Apollo is doing everything at runtime. Remember, it's not just a static site, it's a React site. So we're running those mutations, we're running those extra queries, and boom, we got some dynamic content to be delivered to our users. But there's still two more things we've got to do to make sure this is all rounded off and is actually a progressive web app. So let's take a look at that now. Now back to the code and back into this Gatsby configuration. There's two more plugins that I installed. This one, the Gatsby plugin offline. You want to make sure that, again, for a progressive web app, that your users can use your app offline. The Gatsby plugin offline does all the work for you of implementing a service worker. Their plugin system is great. All you do is npm install a plugin and drop in some configuration into this config file. I'm doing the same thing up here with this Gatsby plugin manifest. This is what is giving us the manifest file. That is the super fancy JSON file that just has all of the information about our app in here. And at the end of the day, what's going to happen is when your user hits the site, maybe on their mobile device, it's going to allow them to actually download the site to their homepage, use it as if it's a regular app. So I don't know about you, but I feel like whenever I'm working on a side project and I want to just ship it and get it out, I don't want to have to worry about configuring all of this stuff myself. Gatsby is an awesome tool that just does a lot of this stuff for you so you can actually focus on the things that actually matter, which is building your app and building the actual functionality of it. Now, you might remember from Rahat's laws of dope apps, we don't want to have to worry too much about deployment. So one of the wonderful things about this type of stack is when you have a Gatsby site, it's very easy to deploy on sites like Netlify. See, you can just put up your code on GitHub, go ahead and connect your GitHub to Netlify, specify what repo your project is on, and it just deploys it. It's magic, like absolute magic. But yeah, like I mentioned during when I was going over the laws, I'm pretty lazy. I don't want to have to like redeploy every single time that there's new dynamic data that should now be fresh, static data. I'll probably forget. I'm not going to remember ever. So thankfully, Netlify already thought about that. And there are definitely other solutions that also have something similar to this. But what they've got is called a build hook. So you can get a build hook for your site from Netlify after you've deployed it. Now, whenever you're creating a song and running that mutation, we're saving some data, to our backend. Now, after we make sure that data is saved, what we can do is actually send a post request to that build hook. When we send it, your app is then triggered for a redeployment. So remember when we created that song, what we could do is after the song's, come back and is ready to go and displayed on the site, trigger that rebuild so that next time your user doesn't have to wait for that dynamic data to load. They can just have some static data. Also, if you want to do a deeper dive into any of these technologies, I highly recommend Swizik Teller's Serverless React course. That's where I learned a lot of this stuff, and it's definitely worth it. Trust me. It's really from that course and just a lot of the things that I've done on my own, I knew that I wanted to turn some of these side projects into a dope fast app. I'm hoping that I can leverage this stack to release a couple of things in the future that you might be able to check out later on. So thank you for attending this talk. Again, my name is Rahat. You can follow me on Twitter at RahatCodes. You can also check out my podcast, Tech for Humans, at techforhumans.io. Give me a follow, give me a shout, let me know what you thought. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Woo! That was
awesome
a brilliant
talk.
Thank you. Brilliant talk. Really, really learned a lot from that. The one thing that I take away from it is that Gatsby's quite possibly awesome. Could you explain to me, somebody who's never used it before or only vaguely played with React, why that is the case?
So it's kind of like does a lot of things for you, like right out of the box, like I mentioned there. I actually used Gatsby to learn React when I was learning how to code, because it just makes certain things pretty easy. You don't have to think about routing and whatever. You just drop in, a component inside of a folder called pages, and it just makes pages for you. So it's you don't have to worry about the little stuff, and then you kind of just go in and do all the fun magic stuff first, and you kind of do that, and then from there, that's how I kind of like learning. I like looking at the bigger picture and going down from there. So it just helped me out in the way that I was learning. So just really love it.
Was it you that made the dope app, or was it Gatsby that made the app dope?
I think a little of both.
Okay. Good answer.
So like Tony and like our previous speaker, Ken, Rahat, you also used to be a rapper, right?
I did for a while. Probably mainly in high school, a little bit in college, but yeah, I realized I wasn't very good and had to go and do something else.
I promise you, take it to tech events, they'll love it.
It's kind of interesting, actually. In tech, the things we think we're bad at become celebrated because we have this skill. Compared to all the other engineers, we're really good, but compared to all the people that are pros at it, we're bad. In high school, I would say I was a jock among nerds and a nerd among jocks. So that's kind of how I think of myself, kind of just branched out. And it seems a lot of us on this conference are kind of similar in multidisciplinary ways,
Yeah, totally see that.
Yeah. So tell us about your session that's coming up later. You have a little segment later in the track, right?
Yeah. So, after I submitted this talk and you reached out and said, you wanted me to do a song. I've never
coercion at its finest.
at first I was going to say no, but I've never also been asked to do a song. So I was like, okay. I also haven't recorded any music in like 2 years. Like I've been making kind of like beats and stuff here and there, but actually recording and writing and rapping a song I haven't done in 2 years. So it was really interesting just to kind of like go back and do it again. It's really fun. It's so the song is kind of like about sort of like my journey into becoming a dev, a little bit about like, saying more like fuck the gatekeeper or something like that. And
Nice. So like earlier we talked about conference-driven development. This is conference-driven musician.
Yes.
Or something, right? That's sweet. Tell us about your journey, because I know I know you're a really strong advocate for like junior developers and beginning developers getting together and talking about it. And you do like your live coding. I think it's Monday nights, or I don't remember which night of the week, but
yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. It's I usually do it Monday nights. I haven't done it this month. It's been Ramadan, so just
Sure.
not been up to doing much. But so one of the first things, so like the very first conference I went to, you were actually, I think, the MC at
Full Stack
conference.
Yeah. Nice.
When I went there, that was like right after I finished boot camp, and I was just like trying to network with people, trying to figure out what I want to do. And one of the other volunteers that I went there as a volunteer, so one of the other volunteers I met was just like, hey, you want to come and talk at my meetup? And I was like, I don't know what I would talk about. I just finished boot camp, like what? But I did it, and I just realized, like, I feel like as a junior developer, you kind of like see things in a way that people who've just been in the field for a long time probably don't, because they probably can't relate to other people who are also starting off as much as they used to. That's just something that happens over time. And I realized that like it was helping me a lot too, because like as I was doing these talks, I was like kind of exploring different technologies, and I'm kind of like leveling up my skills, I guess. And I just started like encouraging other people to do it too.
Yeah, no, there's definitely there's like a good team generally has a balance of perspectives, right? Because if you have all juniors, then you have no like historical context of what you're trying to build. But if you have all seniors, you have no fresh perspective or new ideas. I mean, unless you have a team of seniors that's constantly reinventing themselves, which is pretty rare because people get busy and whatnot. So like a really well-rounded team has different levels of experience. You can bring different ideas together and, morph and melt, gel. And you work at American Express, right? Not that I want to ask you too much about that, but my understanding is you have a team that's really well balanced in that regard. You have a good mix of juniors and seniors, and you collaborate a lot and you really get along nicely. And I'm sure that helps a lot. So, yeah. Let's see. So what do you want to work on next with your side project? Do you want to keep working on this, or are you going to work on something else, or you have other ideas in mind? What would be next?
So this was, so the tech I'm using here is like part of a different side project I'm doing that wasn't like ready, I guess, to really be shown. But I'm working on so I do a lot of stuff in like the mental health space too, being a mental health advocate. So I'm working on a app that kind of like hits an API and then gives you like mental health resources in your area, whether it's like therapists, psychiatrists, or like other alternative means of like getting help. So I do a podcast, and there was one episode that we talked about mental health, and like I was looking for a site that like just like lets you search for kind of like resources in your area. And I couldn't really find something that I wanted, so from there I was like, okay, I'll just build it myself.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really cool. There have been a lot of developer-centric talks I've heard over the past few years about self-care and mental health, because in the past it was just kind of like, you're a smart engineer, you should be fine, you should figure this out yourself. But now there's a much greater realization of like, hey, if we don't take care of ourselves and we're not like helping others and whatnot, we're just gonna, it's an easy way to burn out, to lose your sanity. And I mean, especially now, I think everyone, like most of my conversations, people are like, hey, how are you staying sane right now? What are you doing? How are you coping? Right? And like just trying to share resources and stuff. So how are you staying sane through all this?
So I did kind of want to like get back into music, so I bought myself like a MIDI keyboard and started like relearning some music theory that I kind of used to know, and I've been like here and there trying to make some beats. I don't know if I'll actually take any of them to a full song, but it's been kind of fun to just like do it for fun.
Yeah.
Not even caring about like whether it'll go anywhere like I used to. So once you kind of like, I guess, take that pressure off of yourself, it's just super fun.
Yeah.
Therapeutic.
Well, that's
Is
amazing.
that the key to a good side project, is just to take that pressure off? Because it sounds like making some beats and making a API which helps with people's mental health, two completely different sided spectrums. So is that the key?
Yeah, I think it's definitely the key. It's just like music kind of has always been a little bit of like what I would fall back into. Like even when I was like learning the code at boot camp and trying to get my first job, it was just a good thing to go back to, like to just get away from like the really huge technical stuff and just to unwind for a little while.
Nice. Well, I think that's about it for this segment. Thanks so much for speaking and for the rap we're going to hear. Up next, I'm doing a short, another deep thought sequence, and then there's a break, and then there's your rap, but then we'll continue with Mina Marie's session. So thank you so much, Rahat. And
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Cheers.
Bye.
Cheers.
They said we could fall, but I never played it safe. They said be patient, but I never liked to wait. They said we could fall, but I never played it safe. They said be patient, but I never liked to wait.
When I started, I thought nothing could stop it. On a high so great, I thought nothing could top it. Then I stepped in, and that's when the cold feet was dragging. The voices in my head, yo, all of them were laughing. But that shit was just me, there was no one else there. All my insecurities coming out and laid bare. A fuck up, I knew that, I treat that as gospel. But I knew I could beat that, no matter how hostile. The keepers in my head, they are not the apostle. So I charge and I tackle until they all topple. But these risks, I'ma take them, I am not gonna stay here. This is my song, no, it's not gonna play here. I'm not gonna settle, this ain't the stage I'ma play on. I want so much more, so you know I'ma stay on. I'm hungry, you know that, I'll be fucking selfish, cause I'm not gonna settle with the shit I won't dealt with.
They said we could fall, but I never played it safe. They said be patient, but I never liked to wait. They said we could fall, but I never played it safe. They said be patient, but I never liked to wait.
Yeah. And I'm hearing maybe I don't belong. Let him indulge, yo. Trust, he'll be gone. He's quiet, he's silent. Now why is he trying? He knows this ain't him. To himself he is lying. But look, they forgot the lasagna of Carter. I waited and watched now, I'm not here to barter. I already made it, but I'll take it much farther. Ignoring the bullshit that you all have garnered. So break down the gates, yeah. Tell them it's fate. I'm taking up space, yo. I'm making my way. I'm here, you can sit, you can say it ain't perfect, but I'll put it all out, yo, I know that it's worth it. Then iterate and integrate and watch me keep climbing. If you got shit to say, yo, get your last line in. My matches are lit now, this fire ain't dying. I made my success now, you see I designed it.
They said we could fall, but I never played it safe. They said be patient, but I never liked to wait. They said we could fall, but I never played it safe. They said be patient, but I never liked to wait.
This is for them thoughts in the back of your head. And And for every piece of shit that was wasting the breath, when I was fine with screwing up, that's when I started moving up. Instead of sitting here and wondering, do I do enough? They could say be careful, I ain't playing safe. They could say be patient, I ain't gonna wait. Put the middle fingers up, let them know you won't break. Make sure you tell them all, you're here to fucking stay.
They said we could fall, but I never played it safe. They said be patient, but I never